Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first Lunch and Learn webinar in the special Biosecurity series. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. The Lunch and Learn webinar series is an initiative of the Industry Development and Extension Project. Today, we're pleased to welcome members of the Biosecurity Strategy Project for the first session in this three-part series, which will explore how exotic pests could enter Australia, their potential impacts on the avocado industry, and what we can do to prevent them. Today's session will provide an overview of the key pests of concern, the pathways through which they could enter Australia, and the role of the Avocado Biosecurity Plan in protecting our industry. Before we begin, I would like to thank everyone involved in developing this webinar series and all of you for making the time to join us today. I will now hand over to Zoe Nix from Plant Health Australia, who will be our host for today's webinar and will introduce our presenters. Thanks, Zoe.
Thanks, Renata. And I'd just like to reiterate, thank you all for joining us today. We're really excited to deliver this webinar. Before we get started, I'll just make a note that if you do have any questions as we get through today's webinar, just pop them in chat as we've got some time to ask questions towards the end of the session. We are also recording this session and it will be uploaded to the Avocado Best Practice resource towards the end of the week. So I'll get started. We've got two presenters joining us today, Beck Powderly, who is a coordinator here at Plant Health Australia in the Biosecurity Planning team, and she's going to be talking to Biosecurity Plan for avocado industry, including the action table, which will then be followed by Dalton Baker, who is a research scientist at QDPI, who will be talking to the high priority pests listed within that biosecurity plan and their pathways of entry. I'm going to hand right over to Beck Powderly to get us started.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Zoe. And I'll just take control of the screen. Cool. So yes, thank you everyone for joining online today. Now I'd first like to start by recognizing that I'm joining this webinar from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. I recognize the traditional owners of the countries we are all joining from today and the First Nations people present in this webinar, and pay my respects to all elders past and present. So my name is Beck Powderly and I work in the Biosecurity Planning team at Plant Health Australia. We're a not-for-profit and we're the national coordinator of the Government and Industry Partnership for Plant Biosecurity in Australia. We work across multiple areas in the biosecurity umbrella, and this includes our digital systems, learning and development, and we're also custodians of the emergency plant pest response deed. And for this webinar, I'm just going to be giving a brief overview of the industry biosecurity plan and how it all comes together. And I'll be touching on how the work underpinning the biosecurity plan helps to create resources for the avocado industry. Okay, so before I get stuck into the biosecurity plan, I did want to mention that this webinar series and various assorted pieces of work that the presenters in the second and third one are going to be talking about are an output from the efforts of multiple projects and partners. So I'd really like to thank everyone involved for their collective hard work. And I'd also like to include a shout out to John Tyson and Bridie Carr, who've been involved in this work for an extended period of time and have recently finished up in their roles. And I'd also like to acknowledge Grant Telford, who's the project lead for the first project on there, the Avocado Industry Biosecurity Strategy, I'd also like to acknowledge Hort Innovation and by extension levy paying avocado growers for providing funding for these projects to exist. So My team is involved in the development of the industry biosecurity plans, which are similar in name to an on-farm biosecurity plan, but they serve a bit of a different purpose. So industry biosecurity plans are documents that are used by key decision makers in an industry to increase awareness of exotic pests and diseases and address gaps in preparedness. And so the industry biosecurity plans, they're made in partnership with the peak industry body. In this case, that's Avocados Australia, state and territory governments, researchers, and agronomists. And we usually have some really great input from areas where a crop is grown in particular. And input from the industry also helps to ground truth the risk ratings that we assign to these species. Okay. The avocado industry biosecurity plan being developed as part of this project is in its 4th version, and it involved a review of over 200 pests and diseases of avocado. And the previous version of the biosecurity plan was developed in 2020. So usually they're sort of done on a 5-year review basis. So we had representatives from Avocados Australia, the states and territories, as I mentioned, and researchers, and they use a risk-based criteria to determine which species on the list would be of the greatest threat, otherwise known as the high priority pests. The high priority pests are species that are considered to be the greatest risk of entering, establishing, and spreading in Australia and have a significant economic impact to avocado growers specifically. And the example that I've given today is the black twig borer, which bores into tree branches and creates galleries for its fungal food source to grow in the actual tree. And the infection from this fungus can lead to the full death of an avocado tree. So altogether, there are 12 high priority pests for the avocado industry, and most of these have been on the radar from the previous biosecurity plan. And that's the good thing about having the new iterations of the biosecurity plan, is that and it gives us a chance to make sure that the list is still fit for purpose and read up on new research if anything comes out. For the previous high priority pest list that was made in version 3, papaya mealybug is now established in Australia, and this was removed from the high priority pest list because it is no longer considered exotic. So this process of having that update enabled us to be able to make that change in the plan. Essentially, it was on the high priority pest list. It's now in Australia, so it has been removed. And there's also some other species that were in the previous biosecurity plan, but upon reevaluation and having a look at some new research and some new information, they were determined to have a lower risk of actually entering Australia, and because of that, they have been bumped off the high priority pest list because there is a much lower likelihood of them actually coming into Australia. And they're on a different list now, which is the exotic pest to monitor. They're still on the radar for industry, and they still might be of high economic impact. But because they are less likely to either come in or spread, it makes sure that we can really narrow down the greatest risks and be able to allocate resources in a way that isn't just casting a wide net. So one of the last parts of the biosecurity plan development is the action plan. So it serves as a bit of a work plan for the avocado industry, and it's specifically for biosecurity related activities. So the action plan was created with the same partners that helped put together the threat summary table for the biosecurity plan. And it helps give continuity through the entirety of the plan to be able to ensure that all the activities that are being worked on are able to be saw through or seen through start to finish. As I'd mentioned towards the start of this presentation, there's multiple different groups that are involved in making different resources and working on this. So it's a really good consolidation effort in that way. And there's, I guess, the chance for people to be able to identify some areas of future collaboration, to be able to share information or resources, and it's a really great way for everyone to come together and be able to have those conversations. So yes, prioritizing in this way enables everyone that is involved to work collaboratively, fill gaps in knowledge, and create that awareness of what's going on for everyone. So within this project, for example, some of the outputs have been some updated fact sheets, pest risk analyses, and economic analyses as well. That have been made to help growers be aware of biosecurity risks on your farms. And some of these documents you will be able to find already on the Avocados Australia Best Practice resource. And this project is going until next year, so new resources will continue to be uploaded onto there as they become available. And there'll be some future updates that will be including an update to the on-farm biosecurity plan for growers, impact to trade from exotic pests and diseases, and exotic pest management review documents as well. So now I'll hand over to Dalton Baker from Queensland Department of Primary Industries. He's going to be going into a bit more depth on some of the high priority pests of avocados, including those pathway risk analyses that I mentioned earlier. Thank you very much for your time and bearing with us with the technical issues. But yeah, I'll hand over to Dalton now.
Thanks, Beck. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll just try and make sure I can take over. It's like it's working. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Dalton. I'm an entomologist here at Queensland DPI, and today I've been asked to sort of give a brief overview of the current high priority pests facing the Australian avocado industry, pests and diseases. I'll go over a little bit of the damage that they cause and also the pathways they can utilize to move around, as well as then move into some of the simple on-farm practical biosecurity practices that we can use to stop them from spreading if they do make it here. I'll get straight into it because there's a few to go through. First up, we've got Pasea mite. This one's quite small, obviously being a mite. Adults themselves are about 0.5 millimeter. The females are a yellowish green color with dark spots on the abdomen. Males are much smaller and pear-shaped. And the immatures carry the same yellow-green coloring with dark spots. Realistically, though, you're probably not going to identify the pest before you see the damage. The damage itself is quite distinctive. They build dense silk nets along the midrib and lateral veins on the underside of the leaves. And then underneath that webbing, their feeding damage causes irregular purplish necrotic spotting. And under heavy pest pressure, you'll see real defoliation of the leaves in avocado. This one's already present in Morocco, parts of Europe and the Americas, and it's quite a serious pest in Californian growing regions. Susceptibility seems to vary a little bit by variety, with Hass, Gwen and Reed taking on the worst of the damage, while the Mexican types tend to show fewer symptoms. In terms of its spreading, long-distance dispersal is primarily via infected nursery plants and budwood. So this is fundamentally a planting material risk. It can also be carried on people and machinery, just if they're picked up accidentally moving through the orchard. And then sort of in terms of natural spread, locally wind will carry it short distances between neighboring trees. Black twig borer, Beck sort of already touched on this one. It's a small ambrosia beetle that's around 2 millimeters, dark brown to black and genuinely easy to miss. What you're looking for though is the entrance hole. It's a pinhole size hole, less than 1 millimeter, usually on the underside of a twig or branch. This is one of the only ambrosia beetles that will attack a genuinely healthy plant, not just a stressed one. It bores into the twigs and branches when they're about 2 centimeters in diameter, and it brings with it a symbiotic fungus that it inoculates into the plant tissue. Those infested twigs will then wilt and die within a few weeks. And on avocado specifically, you'll often see a whitish sap exudate right at the entry hole. This beetle is extremely polyphagous, meaning it feeds on a large number of hosts. Been recorded on over 200 species, including avocado, coffee, magnolia, dogwood, and eucalyptus. Likely originated in Asia and has since spread through Africa, North America, parts of the Pacific Islands, and Brazil. In terms of its spread, long distance is usually via, or could potentially be via nursery stock and plant material, as well as wood and timber products. So things like timber pallets, firewood, mulch, those sorts of things. So the plant material and wood movement are a real risk here. Locally, it only moves by flight between adjacent susceptible hosts, and they're only sort of short-range flyers. So the next one is another ambrosia beetle, but I've also included its associated fungus, laurel wilt, on this slide. These two organisms are both considered high-priority pests in their own right, but they have an obligate mutualistic relationship. So the fungus is spread by the beetle. The beetle itself, again, cylindrical, brown to black, about 2 millimeters long. The females fly and tend to far outnumber the smaller flightless males due to their mating system. The disease itself shows up as black-brown vascular streaking underneath the in the xylem beneath the bark, running parallel to the wood grain. So there's a diagnostic test there. The beetles bore into the sapwood and inoculate it directly with fungal spores. The trees will wilt rapidly, starting from a single branch. The leaves will start to turn an oily green color, then dry brown, and then they can fully defoliate within 3 to 4 months with very little chance of recovery. Hosts of this beetle are limited, I believe, to the Laraceae family, which includes avocado and red bay. The beetle itself is native to Asia, and both the beetle and the fungus have been established together in the southeastern United States since 2002. In terms of its dispersal, very similar to the other ambrosia beetles, it's primarily through infested plant material and timber products. So again, firewood, pallets, mulch, things like that. This is the primary pathway for new outbreaks. And again, locally, the beetles can spread by a short-range flight. And because this is an obligate pairing, wherever the beetle goes, the fungus goes with it. Moving to thrips then. So we've got an avocado thrips. These thrips adults are about 1 millimeter long. They're straw yellow with thin dark lines across the abdomen and the wings. And these can appear sort of a dark brown color when folded. The immatures themselves are a pale yellow color. In terms of the damage, their feeding causes bronzing along the leaf veins, which can spread across the whole leaf under heavy pressure. However, the most economically important damage is on the fruit. They can cause brown surface scarring and the characteristic sort of alligator skin, which you can see in the photo on the right there. This will start small on younger fruit and elongates as the fruit grows. So early season feeding can turn into worse scarring by harvest. This is a major economic pest, avocado specifically. It's native to Mexico and Guatemala, was introduced to California in the mid-1990s. It's now a serious pest across the California growing regions. The primary pathway for spread for this guy is also infested nursery plants, but it can also hitchhike on machinery and clothing if they are picked up in the field by workers or people moving around. The adults are quite poor flyers, so natural local movement is short and usually wind assisted. This one probably doesn't need very much introduction. I'm sure everybody in here is very familiar with our native species of spotting bug, but we have an avocado spotting bug that's native to the Pacific Islands or some of the Pacific Islands, very closely related to ours and does similar damage. They've got piercing, sucking mouthparts that inject enzymes into the green fruit, which breaks down the tissue and can cause premature fruit drop in small fruits. They also can generate the stones underneath the skin surface that you'll see in older fruit, which makes the fruit unmarketable. And they have the ability to blind sting fruit. So you'll see internal damage with no visible cracking on the surface of the fruit. And that can be genuinely easy to miss. It's the principal avocado pest in New Caledonia and also present in Vanuatu. And I believe it was also confirmed to be on Norfolk Island in 2022. Unfortunately, there's been almost no research conducted on this species so far. So most of our protocols are taken from those we already use for spotting bugs here. In terms of spread, its regional and long distance movement is mostly via plant material, so eggs laid into various plant material sources. And locally, the adults, obviously, they can fly and local flight will extend their range if they establish. I'm sure we can all agree, don't need any more spotting bug species in the country. Moving on to a lace bug. Those of you that are in macadamia will be familiar with lace bugs, probably. They're quite small. These guys are about 2 millimeters, black-bodied with finely reticulated or genuinely lace bug-like patterns across the wings. These guys will form colonies on the undersides of mature leaves. The feeding that they do causes chlorotic patches that advance the necrosis and defoliation. There's also a suspected secondary effect. The feeding wounds may allow diseases like anthracnose and powdery mildew to get a foothold. So this pest can make other problems worse, not just its own damage. Sorry, I didn't change that. Thank you. So these guys are native to Mexico and the Caribbean Basin. It's now a significant invasive pest in Florida, California, and Hawaii. The primary risk pathway for these guys, again, infested planting material, but it can also be carried on machinery and clothing and just people operating within the orchard. Short-range adult flight can also extend its range locally. Moving on to some Lepidopteran pests then. So we've got the brown-headed leaf rollers. These are two species that I've combined into one slide, but they're both on the high priority pest list. These are small moths. They're about 12 millimeters in body length, and they have a wingspan of up to 25 to 28 millimeters. The forewings generally are sort of a fawn color or a chocolate brown with a darker oblique band. The larvae will shelter inside the silk webbing while feeding on leaves, buds, and fruit, which causes very obvious damage and scarring. And also just the act of them webbing leaves together can cause further scarring on fruit itself. These guys are native to New Zealand, and they have an exceptionally broad host range, been recorded on more than 48 native plant genera, plus a few exotic hosts, including eucalyptus, oaks, and a wide range of horticultural crops. These guys have about 4 to 6 overlapping generations a year, and there's very rarely a clean gap in pressure throughout the season. Primary risk of these guys spreading is via nursery stock and also infested fruit and produce carrying larvae and pupae. But the adults are also quite capable of short-range flight and dispersal in their own right. Moving on to some of the diseases then. So we've got avocado scab as the first one. This is a fungal disease. On leaves, it tends to develop lesions concentrating along the midrib and main veins. This often coalesces into star-like patterns and shot holes may develop. On fruit, we see this sort of corky, raised, brown to purplish spotting pattern that you can see on the right there. These spots are enlarged to sort of rough, cracked areas that let secondary rot organisms in and knock fruit out of marketable grade. Severe cases can cause real losses from fruit drop. So far, I believe it's confined to avocado and currently present in Central America, particularly Mexico, United States in Florida, and South America in Brazil. It spreads, its long distance dispersal is almost exclusively through infected propagation material and budwood. Spores or plant material that are infected can also be carried on machinery and clothing, but local spread, natural spread is usually by wind and rain or insect activity, but these play a comparatively minor role in spreading this disease. It's fundamentally a planting material pathway disease. Moving on to some Phytophthora. So we've got bark trunk canker first. What we're looking for here is bark at or below ground level that's discolored, cracked, or fissured. That distinguishes it from the more common Cinnamomi, which you'll be familiar with. That can stay confined to the lower trunk. It invades large structural roots and the trunk, and it can extend up to 3 meters into the lower limbs, with symptoms sometimes reaching into the fruit itself. A sugary exudate is sometimes visible at the lesions. Currently confined to avocado with a limited distribution within California, but is quite damaging. The primary risk of spread is via infected nursery plants, as well as the movement of soil and water throughout the property if it's infected. And lastly, we have another Phytophthora. This one's called sudden oak death. It causes two distinct disease types. There's a lethal girdling trunk canker, mainly on oaks and tan oaks, and there's a non-lethal remorum blight form, which look like leaf spots and shoot dieback. This can occur on a very wide range of other hosts. On susceptible hosts, you'll see seeping trunk cankers and canopy dieback. and on foliar hosts, you'll see leaf blight and twig dieback. It produces airborne spores that spread quickly once they're established in an area, and has over 130 host species that are documented, including avocado, macadamia, blueberry, hazelnut, and chestnut. It's established in coastal California and in Oregon forests, and also in European nurseries. Long distance spread is via the nursery trade, and contaminated soil, water, and equipment move between properties. More locally, it can spread due to wind-driven and rain-driven carry of airborne spores once it's established. Okay, so those are the current high priority pests facing the avocado industry, but how can we deal with them? Realistically, it's about on-farm biosecurity, which is all about preparedness. There's sort of 5 principles underpinning everything that follows. We have exclusion, which is keeping pests out in the first place through clean, traceable inputs, controlled property access. Prevention is always easier and cheaper than eradication. Early detection, so regular deliberate pest monitoring catches problems while they're still cheap and easy to manage. Minimizing spread, having good farm hygiene stops pests moving within and between properties. Having good records and traceability, so documented sourcing, monitoring, and visitor records speed up any response if something does turn up. And then remembering that biosecurity is a shared responsibility. So everybody on the property or working within the property has a role to play in maintaining orchard biosecurity. And it only works if everybody is doing their part. So from the high priority pests, you probably will have picked up on a few themes and in terms of the pathways. So we have a few key risk pathways where the high priority pests can be spread. These are planting material, so nursery stock, budwood, scion, those sorts of materials. Then plant and wood material, including fruit, prunings, mulch, firewood. And I've also sort of included soil in that as an organic substrate. We have people and machinery and equipment. So obviously people and also machinery and equipment can pick up unintentional hitchhikers as they're moving around, and this can spread things between orchards or even around the same orchard. So I'll just go into each of those in a bit more detail and some of the steps we can take to mitigate those pathways. For planting material, buying trees that are only sourced from ANBIS accredited nurseries. These nurseries are independently audited for pest and disease management. So this is the primary way you can prevent things from getting into your orchard. Inspect every new plant carefully for signs of pest and disease or unusual growth before it goes in the ground. And keep good records. So record where each plant came from, who supplied it, and when and where it was planted. This traceability will matter if a problem shows up later. And cleaning tools. Clean tools, equipment, and machinery used for planting after every use, especially when you're moving between blocks or properties. Plant and wood movement, including fruit. All about controlling what comes onto your property. So control what fruit comes onto your property, including that fruit brought in by workers, visitors, or for personal use. You can restrict access to production areas to limit opportunities for infested material getting in. And you could use a farm zoning strategy to control how sort of soil, water, mulch, even people move around the property. And Rochelle's been kind enough to put together a good schematic there of an example of a farm zoning map. Obviously, everybody's orchard's different, and some will have more access points than others, and it may be slightly more challenging to come up with a farm zoning strategy on your property. But it's a good idea to have a rough mud map and try and restrict access to certain production zones without clearance first. And then also trying to avoid bringing in any outside mulch, firewood, or pruning material or leaf litter. This includes bringing in things like mulch for garden beds that are unrelated to your orchard. People, setting up clear visitor sign-in point at the property entrance is the first point of call, and having good visitor records, so knowing where people have come from before they visit. Have they been in regions or on properties where pests and diseases that you might be on the lookout for are present? Make sure contractors and staff understand your orchard's biosecurity practices and expectations before they enter any production areas. And applying a sort of a come clean, go clean policy for anyone entering or leaving the property. Inspect shoes, clothing, gloves, personal tools for soil, plant material, or pests before entry. Using on-farm footwear or providing foot baths so people can sanitize footwear between properties is also a really good idea and quite simple to establish. And for the final pathway, then we have the machinery and equipment. Similar to people, using clear signage and designated parking areas for visitors and contractors' vehicles to keep them away from production areas if possible. Keep a record of borrowed or shared equipment or contractor equipment that's brought onto the property. And again, applying that come clean, go clean policy for all vehicles and equipment. So this involves inspecting and cleaning vehicles of soil, plant material, and debris before they enter the property. And this can be done by having dedicated farm vehicles where possible, or providing washdown facilities for visiting vehicles and equipment, but also your own vehicles and equipment if you're moving between blocks. And so the final piece that brings it all together, and I can't stress this enough, is monitoring and reporting. We really need to do our part to make sure we are monitoring regularly and keeping very accurate records of our pest and disease monitoring. Even if you don't find anything of particular interest, it's always good to have that record. Familiarize yourself with the materials that have been developed and put onto the BPR or in other locations, like the fact sheets the PHA have developed, so that you know what to look for and where to look for it. And act early if something looks unusual. It's better to report something that doesn't turn out to be a problem than to not report something and then it turns into a problem later. And also communicate. Talk to other growers in your area or talk to your neighbors. If you see something unusual, see if they've seen it too, or if they're having a similar experience. Shared knowledge goes a long way to catching problems faster than any one property working alone. So thank you. I'll now hand back to Zoe.
Thank you, Dalton and Rebecca, for your excellent presentations. We will get into questions very shortly, but before we do, I just wanted to touch on the fact that there are a number of resources available for avocado growers and others involved in the industry if you are looking for more information after anything we've discussed today, including the best practice resource, which has been listed as a great place to capture information on best practice for quality of avocado production. There's also the National Biosecurity Training Hub, which is a centralized platform with a wide range of training courses, including lots which are available online and for free. And finally, the Farm Biosecurity website, which has a large variety of information on biosecurity measures, including what you as a producer can adopt to reduce your risks to your property. Now, before we jump into questions, I'd love to take the opportunity to invite everyone to do a very quick survey for us on how you found the webinar. I've also popped a link into the chat just now. So if you could take the time to scan the QR code or complete the link in the chat, that would be great. And I'll jump right into questions. Now, I do see that we have one already, and I might invite Dalton and Rebecca to join me back on screen to answer these. We've had one here about how real is the threat of these other two Phytophthora species to the Australian avocado industry, especially as we only talk of one. The almond and stonefruit industry has multiple, and citrus have at least two as well.
It is a good question. Unfortunately, being an entomologist, I'm probably not as across the disease management and diseases as I should be. I don't know if Beck, do you know if any information on that from the threat summary tables at all?
Yeah, I can. I suppose I'll see if I can just bring up some of the information that we have collated as part of the threat summary table development, but I think I suppose just speaking off the top of my head right now, so take this with a grain of salt, but the threat, I guess, of the large host range and the risk that if it does come in, that it could be potentially devastating to a wide variety of industries, and its spread potential, it's quite easily moved around without human intervention. And I think, especially with fungi and things that sporulate, it's difficult to be able to contain that. And Phytophthora is, I guess, another example of something that just wants to go. I'm also not a pathologist, so
I didn't mean to throw you under the bus there.
No, it's okay. But I can, yeah, I can just bring up on my computer just the threat summary table for avocados and just see if there's any more info than what I kind of just was chatting about then. It'll just take me a minute just to bring that up. So if you bear with me, I can see if I can provide any more insight there.
Well, while you're doing so, Beck, we did have a couple of questions sent through to us before the webinar as well. And one of them I think is very appropriate given what you spoke about, Dalton, with the wide number of HPPs which have planting material as a pathway, was we were asked if there is a way for avocado growers to find approved suppliers for avocado planting material.
Yeah, so on the BPR, I can provide a link momentarily, but there is a link on the BPR to the list of ANVIS accredited nurseries, so you can find your nursery material through there.
Excellent. We had a couple others, although Beck, do shout out if you're good to go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think fortunately I covered most of what I think I'd want to with the Phytophthora, but I think I guess one more thing to sort of touch on is the potential risk of introduction or movement of propagated material, especially if it's not being moved through official channels, such as through the ANVIS scheme, or if someone's maybe a hobby farmer and they, saw something at a market and thought, oh, okay, I'd like to get that and put it on my farm. It's, I suppose those maybe people who might be not as aware of the potential biosecurity risk that could potentially introduce, and really there's just such a variety of different ways that it could come in, and then from there you might see it's also really spread through waterways and things like that too, so irrigation systems. It's quite readily spread. So yeah, that was just me having a quick look on the at the threat summary table just to see if there was anything else missing there. But yeah, I suppose there's always a risk. Obviously, we just want to try and minimize that risk as much as we can. So Neil, I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Beck. Another question for you was whether growers actually get any input into the action plan that you mentioned during your presentation.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. It's essentially the short answer is no, but the long answer is there's always, I think, input from growers, or the growers in mind is at the core of what the action plan is doing. The activities that are captured in there to be able to empower and enable growers to be the best producers that they can be and minimize their risks, their biosecurity risks on their orchards is the I guess the main point of it. But we really have Avocados Australia in this instance as the I guess real owners of that action plan, and we want to make sure that, and I'm sure they do as well, that they are consulting their growers to make sure that activities that are important to them or things that are important to them are being addressed, especially in the biosecurity space. And I'm sure they would welcome input via the Avocados Australia website to provide feedback or input on activities that they might want to see happen. But yes, that's essentially the long and short of it.
Excellent. Thank you, Beck. Now, if we don't have any further questions in the chat, we'll probably look to wrap up this webinar, and I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Renata has very kindly popped the link to the ANVIS accreditation scheme, where you can find a list of accredited providers into the chat, and she's also included a link to the episode 2 of this webinar series so that you can register for that one. We will be sending around a summary email towards the end of this event, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. We do have one last question that's just been added, which is whether there are any ANVIS suppliers in WA, and whether, if there are no ANVIS suppliers, if WA biosecurity prevents importation. I'm not sure whether either Dalton or Rebecca know that off the top of their head. They may need to actually cross-reference the ANVIS list themselves.
Yeah, I was going to say I would say there'd probably be a list of suppliers that probably would be on that link, I would hope. But yeah, Dalton, did you have?
Not off the top of my head, no. Sorry, I'd have to look myself too.
Yeah, but I know the I guess process for importing plant material through WA is obviously very rigorous, and there's a lot of, I guess, work that goes into making sure that stuff that comes through is tested and has to go through certified points, I guess. So I would imagine there'd be some kind of conversation piece that could be started from that. If there are no ANVIS accredited suppliers in WA, then that might be something a gap that might need to be addressed there. So yeah, it's a good question.
Thanks, Beck. Thanks, Dalton. Alrighty, well, thank you very much, everyone who has joined us today. We really appreciate your time, not only for listening in, but also we appreciate Dalton and Rebecca for putting together their presentations. This webinar will be uploaded to the BPR, and you'll be able to access it again later as a recording if you are interested. And otherwise, you'll be able to see the next two series of the webinars in August and September, on the 25th of August for the second one, and the 15th of September for the third. And we hope to see you there. Thank you all.